everyone, and welcome to the 2023 Goodwood Festival of Speed. Slightly windswept here, but my name is Poppy Mackenzie-Smith. As well as working in the Public Affairs Department at Ford, I am a motoring journalist and an advocate for women in all things automotive. I'm here on the Ford stand, continuing a very important conversation Ford has been having on and off for a couple of years now about the inequity which unfortunately pervades an awful lot of the automotive industry. We're here to try and address why fundamentally women are not just not buying but not even trying EVs. I'm here next to the all-new, all-electric Ford Explorer, which typifies and embodies the adventurous spirit, courage and boldness which we are hoping to discuss today. I am delighted to be joined by three equally adventurous and courageous and bold women. We have Erin Baker, an esteemed journalist and editor who's written for the likes of Auto Trader, Marie Claire and Vogue, who also battles in every corner to try and make sure women are included in automotive conversations. We have Freda Lewis-Stempel, a wonderful blogger, journalist and influencer who is best known as the girl behind the wheel. She has a passion for sustainability and for the past few years has really lent in and specialised in electric vehicles. And finally we have Tanya Sinclair, who is the Senior Director for Policy for Europe at ChargePoint. Today we're going to be slightly drowned out occasionally by very noisy internal combustion engines, but we're not going to be talking about those today. We're going to be discussing electric vehicles and more specifically why at the moment it feels that women aren't being involved in the conversation and what we can do to make sure that at this crucial point when we're transitioning from ICE vehicles to EVs, how we can make sure that everyone is brought along for the ride. So we'll crack on. Erin, first question is for you. How do you think that at this really crucial time, how do you think the purchase and ownership journey, not just for women but for everyone, is shifting, be that online, in the dealership, as we move from traditional vehicles to EVs?
Yeah, I think this is an unbelievably amazing time to be in the industry or to be a consumer, a driver looking for your next car, because this isn't an evolution of the past century of motoring. This is an absolute revolution. It's a step change. It's a step change in the way that brands operate. We've got new entrants coming to the market all the time. It's a step change in the product. We're moving, as you've said, from internal combustion engines to electric. And that means all the storytelling around the product changes. We no longer have to sell cars to consumers, and consumers no longer have to read about cars, watch programs about cars, where we're talking about powertrains, we're talking about chassis, we're talking about suspension settings. All these things are set up for male conversations because they're kind of engineering focused narratives. That's all out the window. You know, now we've got the opportunity to talk about cars in terms of sustainability, carbon footprints, materials, sourcing, lifestyle solutions, concierge services, tech. It's an incredible, exciting time. At the same time as that, we're moving from traditional dealer, retailer propositions to digital online car buying journeys, what we call omni-channel journeys, where it's a little bit of online research, then you might go and do a test drive, then you might go back online. This kind of mix and match approach. It's all geared up to making a more bespoke journey and experience for the consumer. Still got traditional car shows, but we've still got engines revving. It's all part of this crazy world that we're in. So it's a time of huge flux and change, but at the heart of it is the ability for women to feel like cars are far more for them than they ever have been.
And it's interesting, so I'm going to move to Tanya. So what Erin's discussing is the fact that we used to be able to go into a dealership and feel, you know, very kind of a bit like it was a big risky purchase. It's a risky thing sometimes going into a dealership for women. They feel uncomfortable. And studies have shown that women tend to perceive risk more than men when it comes to purchasing, when it comes to ownership, when it comes to driving. And that's really trickled down into, pardon the pun, into charging. And so it does feel like at the moment women are anxious about charging. What do you think we can do to try and address that?
Well, the fact of the matter is, charging is fueling.
Yeah.
It's essential. So nobody should feel that they don't understand it or that there's a risk associated with it. And there's so many dimensions to it. But essentially, it's all about normalizing it for everybody. It's as normal plugging in a car as plugging in your phone or any other appliance that you would have. And whether you plug it in at home or on the go or at work or at the supermarket, wherever you go, it should be an experience that you're comfortable and confident with. The main way that we can do that is standardization. So right now, you know, as an EV driver, I'm faced with having to have a number of different steps, in any combination that I might have to take between getting my car into the parking space and actually getting electricity into it. I might have to download an app, I might need a physical payment card, I might need to use my Apple Pay or something like that. I might need any combination of these, and the charger still might not work. So I think the reliability and standard user experience, much like conventional fueling, will then help us bring confidence to all drivers to be able to use it.
And do you ladies agree about the whole standardisation? So there was recently an announcement that I think in the next couple of years, all chargers are going to have to be sort of app-free. So any charger that's open to the public has to be able to be just debit card, credit card, Apple Pay straight in. Do you feel that sort of charging standardisation is the way to go?
I mean, yeah, and I think also it's a really interesting kind of balance between what we'll be probably talking about a lot today, which is like the technical data you get told, and then the lifestyle way to kind of put it across. And I think we get this kind of stuff a lot. We know like fast charge and things like that. For instance, like with the Explorer, 10 to 80% in 25 minutes. That's brilliant, fast charging. And we think, okay, cool, we exactly get that. But for women who maybe don't know much about EVs, it's kind of up to manufacturers, I think, to put that in terms that they can really understand in their lifestyle. And so it's basically associating it with something else. So for instance, we, as an example, we will go to the gym, right? I have a friend who's religiously goes to the Pure Gym Bums and Tums class. It's 30 minutes, okay? But bear with this example. She'll be so embarrassed that I'm calling her out. But that's the thing, is if you say, okay, while you're doing that gym class, your Explorer has charged from 10 to 80%, and say you've got maybe 250 miles, and because the gym has free charging, you haven't had to pay anything, and then it's brilliant. You get your standardized tech, and you get a way to understand it that means something in your life as well. I think is really important. I don't know.
I couldn't agree more. All these things that are it involve a lot of jargon, for example, charging, kilowatts, kilowatt hours. I've been embroiled in this world of electric cars now as a motoring journalist for a decade, really. A decade since the first electric cars really came out properly in the UK. I still have to stop and think, what's a kilowatt, what's a kilowatt hour, what's the whole, and it's just, if we don't get it, consumers are never going to get it, and we shouldn't have to. There shouldn't be, so it's about stripping out all the jargon, as you say. It's about, instead of this kind of weird 20% to 80% charging time, and is that fast charger, rapid charger, ultra rapid charger, what do those three things mean? Turning up at a charging point, do I need an app, have I got to download a, why is it not pay as you go? All those things, 100%. It's a shame we didn't get all this, in place when we began, because those poor early adopters who really were brave enough to buy into this have had a poor experience. We have to call it that until now, but it's rapidly changing, and rightly so.
Yeah, one thing I will say is that we can kind of give ourselves a break in the sense that the EV industry has been around for a decade, 15 years properly. The ICE internal combustion engine industry is a century old, right? So we are living and learning, and we're really learning quickly what messages do and don't work with various driver and consumer groups. Just talking about kilowatts and kilowatt hours, though, I used to, in the early days of EV, working now for 12, 13 years in this industry, use miles per minute, right? So how many miles will be added to your range for every minute that you charge? And that, for me, is a really good way of explaining the different speeds of charging without knowing what 7 kilowatt or 250 were in terms of charging speeds. That doesn't mean anything to a lot of people. So there's ways that we can kind of test different ways of explaining how EVs work and how they work for you as a driver.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I'm going to come to Freda on this one. How do you think manufacturers specifically can improve how they're talking about this kind of thing? So not just about the charging itself, but how do you think manufacturers who are launching a new vehicle can make it more digestible for female consumers? That was a really good analogy about the gym thing. That was really, really strong. So
I and something that I think we'll probably come on to, but something that I've really noticed, and I would say probably mainly working in the e-commerce car buying space, but also particularly with manufacturers and then for specific EV companies. I've worked from leasing to rental and stuff, so I've kind of seen what's the size market. But it is this thing that ultimately your car is a daily necessity, right? It's a need. There are loads of like flashy, fun tech things. Great, they're amazing. But you want your EV as a woman to get you from A to B. You want it within your budget, you know, safely, reliably, all that stuff. And so the thing that I never quite understand is why you'll see marketing, you'll see an advert, and it's like 30 seconds of a woman in, you know, an amazing outfit. She's jumping in her car, she's going to the beach like perfectly lit with like ambient lighting. Well, that's lovely, but how many like people really, like how many women are like, yeah, that's my realistic life? Like, it's just not. And so I think we have this thing like with fashion where it's, you see real women in the clothes. So why aren't we, you know, why aren't car manufacturers showing us a real woman driving these cars? You know, the woman like she's going on the school run, you know, something like that. Like, show us that, and then immediately you can see that EV in your own life. And I think
show her late and stressed for the school run.
Exactly,
That would be the way to do it.
show her having an absolute mare and you're away.
And it is, it's about that reality. So Erin has recently, you've launched She's Electric. Can you tell us a bit about that and why it's so important for this kind of conversation?
Yeah, so She's Electric came about from multiple conversations with car brands and retailers and people thinking, well, you know, they don't have enough information about electric cars to make the switch. So we're seeing the gender gap widen amongst drivers just when it should be naturally narrowing with the switch to electric, because we know women love sustainable products. So why is this happening? Why are women less engaged with electric cars than men are? And they are by a huge degree from a shed load of data that we've done recently. And it's because they don't have the information, because, you know, they don't read car magazines. I'm generalising, but generally they don't read car magazines. They don't watch car reviews on YouTube. They don't watch car programmes. They don't talk about cars with their mates down the pub. But they're getting all their information really from their peers. So if their peers aren't driving electric cars, they just know nothing about them. So they don't know about 2030. They don't know about all this stuff. So how do we engage women where they are instead of waiting for them to be in market for their next car? We have to go out and proactively find them in the spaces where they exist: well-being, health, families, food and culture, so on. So She's Electric is a national roadshow, 6-part roadshow in the UK, where we go around, we work in tandem with car brands. Test drives will be available, but actually before the test drives take place at this very nice lifestyle location, so no car dealerships, no car locations, no circuits or tracks, it's all just nice lifestyle locations. Women will come along. There'll be a safe space where they can ask me any questions they like about going electric. No question too stupid. That's the main thing. No question too stupid. Yeah. Can I charge it in the rain, or will I get an electric shock? That sort of thing. Absolutely fine. We've all wondered that. And then test drives, we'll roll that out throughout this year, next year and onwards, I think, because, you know, in the run up to 2030, there's so much work to be done to bring women on board. We need to bust myths around things like electric cars, charging, range anxiety, also electric cars being so much cheaper to run. Women get to that purchase point, think too expensive, forget it. They don't go beyond that to look at total cost of ownership. All this stuff needs explaining to them, and why would they or should they know about it? We have to go and find them and talk to them.
Yeah, anything to add, ladies, on that?
Yeah. I mean, I'm so glad you mentioned 2030, because this isn't a choice. We're heading towards a point very near in the future where every new car on sale will be electric, and we don't want to have a situation where people don't want to be at that point and they don't want to make that switch. So now is the absolute perfect window of opportunity to engage in these conversations and build confidence and build interest and build excitement, so that it doesn't feel like a big cliff edge in 2030, and it's just people are already doing it and people are already wanting these vehicles when that point comes.
Because fundamentally, sorry, Freda, be better.
Oh no, I was just going to say, like, I think what Erin's doing is really brilliant, because again, it's something like that safe space is just so important, because I think it's something you've said quite a lot, like also women have different needs from cars, right? And that idea of banter, you know, that puts so many women off like dealerships and stuff, we're all being swept away. But I think, like, for instance, the Tough Talks, right? I saw Abby Eason doing a Tough Talk and she was talking about banter. And it's something that probably all of us will have experienced, and that is exactly what women face. And so to give them that space where they feel that they can ask anything, then they can get in the car afterwards, you know, without feeling judged at all. They can sympathise and empathise. And then also, as a manufacturer, like, it's not just women, that single woman. She actually has massive say in like household purchasing power. And the Daily Mail did such a fascinating study where they found that like 9 out of 10 times, a man would say that the woman like in the household has equal say in the car buying, 88% of the time she just decides the budget, 85% of the time she's doing the research.
Yeah.
So actually, if those women who are going along, they're not just going along for themselves,
Yeah.
they will then go and inform what maybe many manufacturers would think is like a male target market.
Yeah.
So yeah, like grab them.
No, totally
grab,
agree.
grab the girls and go.
And it's because, Erin, I remember you did a great stat about what's the percentage, I forget, of how many women would rather buy a fridge than a car. And like, what do you think that means in terms of like how women are currently feeling, like EV or not, about the car buying experience? Like,
Well, it's shameful, isn't it? If you work in the industry, it's a huge embarrassment.
Yeah.
You know, I always talk to my friends in the tech industries, and they're slack-jawed about how far we've still got to go in automotive and how rapidly we need to get there. You know, no one goes into an Apple store or any sort of smartphone store and thinks, oh, this is a very masculine environment. I don't feel at all welcome here, and you know, I feel nervous, or I need a degree of assumed knowledge about processing power in my computer. I mean, no one thinks that.
Yeah.
So why do we assume that consumers need some sort of, you know, some sort of pre-knowledge about the product or the brand? It's crazy. So I think it's unsurprising that a lot more women would prefer to buy white goods. I think actually there's a crucial learning when it comes to electric cars for the industry from women saying they'd rather buy a fridge, which is half the reason women find buying a fridge so easy is because there's a sticker on most white goods when you get there with an energy rating.
Yeah.
And the energy rating isn't about kilowatts or anything like that. It's a coloured bar graph.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you don't, again, have to know what it means. Is it red or is it yellow or is it green?
Yeah.
There's the price. There's what it can fit inside it. Do I want it or not?
Yeah.
It's a bit like the food ratings, isn't it? It's the same colour code. You know,
Yes.
you've got red for bad food all the way to
Yeah.
green these days. Yeah.
And I think we shouldn't be afraid to sort of simplify it. You know, I think some brands are so keen to sort of say like, well, our car's got the best tech, it's got the best this and that they're scared to just literally just put a thing on it saying green. It means good, it's great, it's a really good car to drive. So we've all driven electric vehicles, some of us do on a more regular basis. Like Tanya, I'm going to come to you on this. How do you try to convey to like your friends, your family, whatever? And we talk about how important peer review is in terms of getting women to EVs. How do you try and like explain how much nicer it often is to drive an EV? Like, how do you explain that to someone?
This is an interesting one because, you know, I consider myself to be, you know, one of the biggest proponents of electric vehicles, you know, for over a decade in this country, and I cannot convince my own family. My mum in particular, my sister in particular. It's really a struggle, and I would say it is. You know, a fear of the unknown is a bit of a difficult one because, you know, they've seen my car and driven my car. It
Yeah.
looks and feels exactly the same to sit in, right?
Yeah.
As a driver experience, right? The perceived quality, the interiors, you know, everything feels like a regular car.
Yeah.
So what is it? It's and you know, talking about, you know, my mum and my sister who drive maybe 20 miles a week, if that, it fits them perfectly. It is, you know, I think just as a fear of running out of charge, not having charged before versus fueled before. And I really think we have to break this, you know, this sense of it being different.
Yeah.
And, you know, when I, you know, having worked in this industry for several years, we only got an EV in 2019. And I was nervous. You know, I've charged one, I'd driven one before, but I was like, well, hold on, what if I get stuck here? Or
Yeah.
what happens if I don't understand this charger? Or what happens if I don't have... And, you know, for me, I was happy to jump in, but I don't think that that's a fair expectation on everybody. So I think it was really about normalizing and making the technology accessible and visible to everybody and just, you know, making it a lot more widespread.
Yeah.
ChargePoint, for example, you know, we do a lot of our charging what we call behind the fence, so in depots, workplaces, that kind of thing. I think we need to see a lot more chargers out in the public domain. And, you know, it really is as simple as plugging in your mobile phone in most cases.
Yeah, I think it's a good way. I think a few times we've all mentioned the word tech, which is really interesting because I think increasingly EVs are, because they are relatively new in terms of mainstream, people are looking at them as like a more techie purchase. And I think that's been shown that men who are looking at purchasing them are looking at them very much as a big tech investment rather than like necessarily a motoring one. I mean, how do you think we can change it? Do you think we should change it? Like, how can we make this tech purchase, can we use that to our advantage to make it more accessible to women?
I think that the very aspect of the technology angle that we used in the early days in the car industry to market EVs is that same thing that is excluding new consumers from it, right?
Yeah.
So tech is by its nature can be marketed as complicated or difficult, or only for a certain group of people who are interested in it. Well, we're talking about transport. We're talking about an essential means for everybody to get around and live their daily lives. It shouldn't be exclusionary. So I think we've got to find a way of finding a way to talk about technology in an inclusive way.
Yeah.
There's this great stat from the No Driver Left Behind Women in the Journey to Electric report that we did at Auto Trader a month ago, that only 12% of women that we surveyed, and it was a big survey, 4,000 people, only 12% were remotely interested in a tech purchase, car as a tech purchase, or the tech inherent in it. And actually only 22% of men were. So it's double the amount of women, more or less, but it's still a really low percentage. And so Tanya's absolutely right. What was at the start a positive attribute in terms of early adopters has become a bit of a millstone, really, around the neck of car brands, and everyone has to rethink their comms, their marcom solutions, their advertising, their above-the-line campaign, and their social all of it, and start thinking, actually, how do we bring the emotive attributes of electric cars out now, and the emotive attributes of the entire lifestyle switch, and that actually, let's bring out the fun elements of electric cars in terms of performance and acceleration, let's bring out the silence and the smoothness of the ride, and all these things that when women get in an electric car and go, wow, that's a lot of fun to drive. Why was that? We kind of help bring that out, because it's a great purchase. You know, petrol heads, lots of petrol heads are being convinced that electric cars are fun to drive or feel like a luxury thing to drive. It's a lovely thing to drive.
There's one thing that we haven't talked about, surprisingly, which is sustainability or emissions, because, you know, thinking about, well, anybody, but women in particular as you know, running families, you know, I think a lot about my kids at exhaust pipe level, walking around towns and walking around where I live. And, you know, I'm, you know, grateful that where I live there's a lot of people who drive electric cars, because just by you know, statistically there's fewer emissions that they're exposed to. So, you know, I think there's a lot of opportunities to have a very sensible conversation about EVs, as well as the, you know, the fun and lifestyle and performance aspects.
That's true. Because Freda, you're very passionate about sustainability.
Yeah, and do you know what? That's actually really interesting, because the moment my mother and I was like, cool, I'm in for EVs, like signing up, was actually when she came charging with me, and actually was like, this is such a clean experience. Like, not only is it sustainable and lovely, but she was like, actually, full call, like, you know, traditional petrol, like full and stuff, going to the petrol station, it's just like grimy, you know, it's grotty. Like, you're so aware of the fuel, you're so aware of the fumes and all that stuff, and then you pull up and you like plug in, and it's like, you know, the sunshine and rainbows come out, and it's just so lovely, and like all the sustainability, then you see it, you know, you understand it and you feel it. And I think that, yeah, that's a moment, you're so right, like with thinking about your kids, where I think the sustainability like really hits home, and sometimes it kind of gets lost, but you're like, oh, this is really green. It's great, yeah.
It's interesting bringing up the kind of petrol forecourt thing, because I totally get that sense of it is a cleaner experience. There's no sort of leaky nozzle, or at least there shouldn't be leaky. And it feels like it's quite a pleasant experience. But on the flip side, I think we all put out some questions to followers and things, and a couple of people have raised, it's a question that comes up time and time again, is that women don't feel that safe in certain charging experiences. That's not to say all of them, you know, some people have home chargers, there's well-lit ones, there's public ones in great areas, but there are times when I've personally felt just a bit like a sitting duck, you know, I'm there, I've got to be there for at least 40 minutes, I'm in an unlit car park by myself, and I've got to be there for a while, compared to, you know, in and out, 5 minutes, well-lit, CCTV, you know, staffed kind of thing. I mean, I'll just start with you, Tanya, as the charging expert. Like, how do you think we can bring them into the conversation? How can we reassure women or anyone, and how do we begin to change that?
It's down to the industry of which I'm part. It's so important to provide, it should be the responsibility of the operator to not just provide the charger, but to provide, you know, a safe and you know, pleasant experience of charging. And that doesn't always mean you need a, you know, a sort of shopping centre next door or something like that. But, you know, basics like lighting and signage, I think, are really important. And just also, most importantly of all, the charger has to be working. working.
Yes.
I've been on my last 10 miles before and approached a charger that did not work. And yeah, you are left with a thought of, I am going to have to sleep in my car overnight. And it is very, very stressful. And so I think the reliability of the physical charger is absolutely kind of crucial to the whole thing. And then, you know, I think people will start to vote with their feet in the sense that we're seeing enough chargers around that if there's one that isn't lit and isn't perceived as safe or nice to use, people won't use it. And so we'll see a sort of improvement of competitive tension between all the networks from that point of view, from the user experience perspective.
I feel like the flip side of the coin, and it's very rare to have the media with any good news stories, but one is, I'm quite keen on really pointing out for consumers hesitant about making the switch for a number of reasons, about perception versus reality. Because I think partly the media has really drummed up this idea of, it's going to be dangerous for women out there, you're all going to be looking for someone to charge at 1 a.m. and some dark secluded. Well, I've been driving electric cars for 5 years and I've never had to find somewhere at midnight or 1 a.m. to charge. And if I have, I've been on a motorway and they've been, you know, big, well-lit spaces. But again, you know, you speak to women who have been driving EVs for a while and they were all worried about this scenario before they bought, and for 10% of them it's ever been an issue. So I think, again, it's really important that we find women that drive EVs, have been driving them for a while, are advocates for them, because they're all advocates. You know, I think 81% of women that drive electric cars would buy another electric car. They love the experience. And so get them to tell their stories. You know, if you're a retailer or you're a car brand, or you find these women, get them in front of the camera or get them writing a blog or whatever, saying actually to other women out there, it's okay.
But actually, do you know what, I completely agree with that, because one of the questions I got a lot when I asked was this kind of idea of like, what happens when things go wrong? Where do I find the information when things go wrong? Especially like with breakdown and safety. And actually, if you ask like the RAC or the AA, honestly, it's like level the breakdown, you know, amount. Like, it's not like EVs run out to way more than it breaks down fuel. And most of the time, if there is a problem that you run out of charge, it's actually in urban areas. So it's completely that thing of like, is that really the reality? And also, again, like, you know, maybe it's a slightly different way of driving, but you're not going to be doing all of your journeys as a woman, like, you know, massively long distances where you can plan ahead. And if you are, like, you likely, you know, you're a woman, you will have planned ahead. You know, you'll know that. And so I think, again, like, the actual reality of being like completely stranded, it might happen, but it's easily preventable as well.
Yeah. Well, so much of all of these scenarios that are, like you say, fed into the media, there's fear, uncertainty and doubt, this FUD kind of agenda that you see, and it's really pervasive. And, you know, it can so much of it can be completely laid to rest by getting in an EV and using it for a week. Just get in one, see how it goes, and you'll find, no, you don't need to charge on every single journey. And no, your range doesn't sort of just suddenly disappear off a cliff edge. And, you know, you get to understand, actually, it's not this big leap that you're led to believe that it is.
Yeah, like, I've run out of petrol like 4 or 5 times in my life, because I'll see that light, I'm like, I've got loads of time. Whereas with an EV, it does just make me plan, even if it's a tiny addition of 2 seconds in my day to think, oh, well, I'm en route. And also, so many cars have built in to their sat-nav, right, here's your journey plan. Everyone uses sat-nav all the time. It will come up and ping to you, say, right, 10 miles here, there's a lovely charger. And
where are most people doing their charging? Like, if you're a woman in the countryside, you are likely to have your own charging at home. That's, you know.
It's so funny because we talk about technology as potentially excluding some new buyers, but within the technology are things that are much more intuitive and easy to use about an EV than an ICE vehicle. So, you know, talking about finding a charger, you don't need to find one. Your car tells you exactly where it is. You know, there's so many things that actually remove the uncertainty.
Yeah, your smartphone tells you what your car's telling you as well.
Exactly. And it's so, you know, we've got sort of technology in some vehicles where you can start the charge from your phone. You can, you know, use your Apple Watch to start your charge. You know, it's all integrated, it's all designed to make life easy for you. So, you know, rather than be nervous about this transition, actually what we try to do in charging is make the charging experience easier than current fueling, right? And current fueling experience is actually quite clunky, you sort of physically everything, getting out the car, putting the physical thing in, you have to go and pay in a lot of cases. There's a lot fewer steps with charging, and it's getting more and more seamless all the time.
Having said that, I do think there is an onus on those of us in the industry to recognise that women are not more risk averse. I'd hate that, because that's like, you're not as brave as men. That's rubbish. But we are more risk heightened because we are responsible for the majority of caring. We are, so we do think more readily what happens if I run out of charge with the kids in the back on the motorway, because we probably are the ones with the kids in the back on the, or what happens if I didn't plug in the night before and I've got to take my sick mother-in-law to a hospital appointment, because we are the ones that are going to be doing that. Or, more women live in social housing than men, and social housing don't have charging points, but as a matter of, so women are more disadvantaged in the charging approach, but it's simply about communicating then.
Is there just like a quick maintenance course you can go on for like a day as a woman to like change tyres, all of those things? And I was like, it's pretty hard to come by, and I kind of think there's definitely an opportunity for that, like within electric, for like manufacturers, even maybe the government, maybe like Alphas or the A or whatever it is, but to do, a quick course for a woman to go on for a day to like understand, quickly about that EV, what happens in those scenarios, or I think DriveWise does one, but it was very hard to kind of find anything like that, and I think that would be a really useful thing. Or even, when you get your new EV, like you get the option to have, a couple of hours quick lowdown kind of, and so just put your mind at ease with all those kind of things would be great.
And I think as we kind of keep coming back to, it's once you've got that real life experience, it's not so scary. So often the thought is so much scarier than the reality.
Like no one reads no one gets their new iPhone and actually reads a manual. Like you'll figure it out, or my mum will be like, okay, quickly, how do I do this? And it's like done. Do you know, like same with the EV.
It's true, and it is much more intuitive. Often it's literally on off. Kind of go. It's interesting. So all of us asked a couple of our followers like various questions, and when I put it on my Instagram, I kind of said to all my friends, as Erin said, there is no such thing as a silly question. So I've got a couple of questions from various ladies who just wanted to ask our team of experts various things about EVs sort of generally. The first one I had was, do you actually think EVs are the future? Which I think was quite an interesting one.
Do we think they're the future?
Yeah.
I was having just this discussion last night actually. They are for now. I think they are. I think there's a big question mark over hydrogen, which is the only other thing that's remotely really on the agenda. Fossil fuels, we're all agreed. We've got to get rid of. We've got to stop digging things out of the earth and pulling things out of the earth. And so you're looking at renewables, you're looking at hydrogen. Hydrogen, a few car brands are delving into, that's clearly got much bigger commercial applications before it's got any sort of personal transport applications because of the inability to store it, transport it, and so on. And so I get a little bit tired of people saying, well, of course, electric is the stepping stone to hydrogen. Maybe, maybe not. I mean, there are people with huge scientific brains out there who say maybe, maybe not. We don't know, but electric is what we've got for now. And actually, to the naysayers who talk about, well, do you know how unsustainable actually electric cars are, and they've got a much bigger carbon footprint in their manufacture than petrol cars? Yes, they have for now, but that's changing all the time. They're getting greener all the time. And also, going back to what Tanya said earlier, tailpipe emissions. We forget so conveniently about tailpipe emissions. And like Tanya, I don't want my children breathing in tailpipe emissions in cities. So electric is good, guys. Let's stick with it for now. We're on the right path.
I agree. And I think, broadly, the same answer. They are the future for cars, for vans. And I think everything else, I don't think it matters kind of where we go, so long as we move away from fossil fuels. So buses and trucks, for example, there's lots of great technologies out there that are significantly better for emissions and then for the environment than what we've got today, which is diesel. So absolutely, I think so. And I think we look a little bit too much into the future and actually maybe let's work out sort of today's and tomorrow's problems, which is, getting confidence up and getting people into cars and ensuring that market is there for everybody to participate in.
I completely agree. Like, I also think it is that thing. Like, automotive does actually go through quite a lot of shifts. And at the moment we've got EVs, but then we've also got loads of people moving from like manual to automatic. We've come full circle with the EVs. They were originally designed for women, like the 19th century. There's so many different changes, and I think you can have a balance. There might be the long haul does hydrogen. Maybe like the US does more hydrogen because they're vastly bigger. I mean, you all know this completely with charging. The UK is actually quite well built for it because we're a small island. So maybe there's going to be a mix. Maybe there'll be some people who are still running their petrol, diesel for some reason. There'll be a bit of hydrogen in the mix, but the vast majority, will be electric. But ultimately, it's also one of those things that I always think when people are a bit silly. It's like it's kind of too late to say no to electric. We're all there. We've all made the shift. So you might as well
catch up.
Yeah, catch up.
Yeah, Ford's been doing a couple of sort of trials with hydrogen, but it's for fleet sort of commercial vehicles. And I think a lot of people are so keen on the whataboutery. They're like, oh, what if I need to drive my van for 500 miles a day with 18 tons in the back? So, well, okay, maybe electric isn't for you, one person, whereas for the average driver, I mean, I can't remember how many miles the average woman does sort of in a week, but it's a small amount. People, I think, really overestimate how much they actually drive. People tend to go to 4 or 5 places, semi-regularly. But
also, again, the thing with changing lifestyle and thinking about your kids, and it's the car thing, I thought was so brilliant because actually you don't necessarily have to take your car. That's the thing, you might be driving an EV, but that doesn't mean that even with an EV you need to drive it around the city. Hop on the bike, walk, take the public transport. Maybe it's just a different way of thinking about driving in general as well.
So another question we had was, are EVs really cheaper? And interpret that however you want. So.
Oh, well, I'll go first with that one from my personal experience, having, and I don't think I've ever bought a car, but I've leased cars all my life. So let's talk about it from that point of view, because, as someone that's leased them, the price is exactly the same. I've never leased a new car either, actually. So this is talking about leasing used cars. With fueling and maintenance, absolutely, poles apart. And with everything that's happening with electricity prices lately, there's a lot of talk in the news about the price of fueling an EV becoming comparable with that of petrol. There's a little bit of work to do on making that price of fueling an EV more standardized and equitable, because still at home, and I don't have my own driveway, I park on the street, there are people who do have driveways where it costs them a lot less to fuel their EV than it costs me to fuel mine when using the public network. There is some work to do there, I think, to make that price more cost comparable for everybody, just like it is for petrol and diesel, where you know how much it will cost you to fill your tank based on the price of petrol at the petrol station, which is roughly the same everywhere in the country. We have too much price disparity at the moment. So the market, I think, will start to work its way through that issue. But I think it's coming down to uncertainty. If you're running a household budget, you can't. It's just not a fair expectation of you to not know whether you're going to be paying 20 or 90p per kilowatt hour for your charge. I mean, it's a huge gulf that we need to kind of improve on. I think in the charging sector.
So the price differential for new cars at the moment between electric and petrol diesel is still on average 37%. So it hasn't shifted in the past 18 months. We all thought, analysts thought, the price of electric cars will come down a lot more quickly than they have, and that's to do with raw materials, battery technology, all sorts of things. That's new. Used is fantastic at the moment, and too many consumers don't know about used electric cars. At the moment, there's more supply than demand in used electric car market, so actually there's never been a better time to buy used. And then as far as running costs go, at the moment our data is showing Auto Trader that you're saving, on average, averaging out pricing of charging, £86 per 1,000 miles travelled. So you can do your own math on, over the cost of an average 36-month, 48-month finance deal, especially if you live in a congestion charge zone, especially if it's a company car and you're getting benefit in kind, especially if all sorts of things. For some, it works out that the total cost of ownership brings down that differential and scraps it within that finance term. For others, it might not be the case, but used might be a good way in. So. You've got to do your calculation.
Yeah. Also, I think, again, it's that thing, right now, we're in a particular moment. A new EV launch is a big deal, but, we've got a lot of EVs coming in from, Asia and stuff, and by 2030, by 2035, by 2040, there are going to be so many more EVs, and it's a classic thing that brings down the price for manufacturers to make them, batteries, all the raw materials. So, kind of eyeballing it right now is too difficult,
Yeah.
because it's the same with how combustion cars were. They used to only be something for the super rich. Now the vast majority of people have a car, so it will change as well. Like, I think that's another thing for people to bear in mind.
Yeah.
So maybe the upfront cost now might be more, but you're also making the running cost savings, but just think further down the line.
Yeah, it's an investment sort of
Exactly.
further down. No, you're
Yeah.
right. I think we'll do one more question, which I will answer, which was my favourite one I received, which is, do I need a different driving licence to drive an EV? Which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah,
like, that's
absolutely.
how removed some women feel
Yeah.
from this conversation. We know the answer is no. Anyone can drive an EV. Anyone with a driving licence can hop in, and will probably have a much nicer time than if they're maybe a less confident driver. It's automatic, it's easy, it's fun to drive. Ladies, I will leave it there. Thank you so much
so
for your
much.
insight, your expertise, your honesty. It's been wonderful. Everyone who's watched, I hope you've learned a lot about EVs. Please let us know in the comments if there's any questions you'd like us to address. We're here on the Ford stand, as I said, with the all-new, all-electric Ford Explorer, which is personally my favourite EV on the market at the moment. But thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the Festival of Speed.